This is an interview that they're having with prior President Mr. Obama. Let's tune in and see what they got to say here. Thank you.
As recently as 10 years ago, were functioning democracies, and now essentially have become
democracy doesn't always
authoritarian.
die in a military coup.
Yes.
Democracy dies at the ballot box.
That's exactly right. And you know, Vladimir Putin gets elected with a majority of Russian voters. But none of us would claim that that's the kind of democracy that we want.
You wrote about the importance of getting exposed to other people's truths, and that is how attitudes change. What happens when the only truth that people are willing to expose them to is their own?
Yeah. Well, look, this is part of the challenge. It's part of the challenge with social media. You know, I think there's been a lot of conversation about how we are able now to just filter out anything that contradicts our own biases, prejudices, and predispositions. It's not symmetrical, I have to say this. You know, the truth is that on what at least the right would consider liberal media like CNN, you know, you guys will still take Democrats to task for things. I think Democrats, Lord knows, when I was president, I was getting a lot of incoming from my own base, and so you know, it's not symmetrical. But what is true is, for all of us, there is a great danger that we just shut out anything that contradicts our own sense of righteousness in these big debates.
Not only that, but then we otherize the
and we demonize the other side. And so that is going to require steady effort. It probably is not going to be done at the federal level. It's probably going to involve communities finding ways to rebuild that sense of neighborliness, working together, conversations. You know, one of the things that, having been out of office for a while, I've gone back to thinking about is how can we do more bottom-up work to rebuild communities, to rebuild local media, to rebuild local conversations, because that's where I think there's still the most hope.
It was during President Obama's 8 years in the White House that the American public began learning and saying the names Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, and Michael Brown. Young black men killed by police, or in Trayvon Martin's case, by a neighborhood watch volunteer when Martin was 17 years old.
When Trayvon Martin was first shot, I said that this could have been my son. Another way of saying that is Trayvon Martin could have been me 35 years ago.
President Obama was both praised and criticized for that statement, one of several reminders for the first black American president that how and when he discussed race was something he and his advisors had to think carefully about. In his book, he writes that early on in his presidential campaign, his advisors warned him about being boxed in as, quote, the black candidate. Looking back, as president, did you tell the story of race in America enough, do you think?
Yeah, well, look, I tried. I think I told a lot of stories. You take a look at the speeches I gave in Selma, and the speech I gave during the campaign about Reverend Wright and that whole episode. And you know, each and every time I tried to describe why it is that we are still not fully reconciled with our history. But the fact is that it is a hard thing to hear. It's hard for the majority in this country of white Americans to recognize that, look, you can be proud of this country and its traditions and its history and our forefathers, And yet, it is also true that this terrible stuff happened, and that you know the vestiges of that linger and continue. And the truth is that when I try to tell that story, oftentimes my political opponents would deliberately not only block out that story, but try to exploit it for their own political gain. I tell the story in the book about the situation where Skip Gates, a Harvard professor who's trying to get into his own house, gets arrested, and I'm asked about it. I don't know, not having been there and not seeing all the facts, what role race played in that, but I think it's fair to say, number one, any of us would be pretty angry. Number two, that the Cambridge police acted stupidly in arresting somebody when there was already proof that they were in their own home. And not only did that cause a firestorm, as you will recall, you were already in the press at that time, but subsequent polling showed that my support among white voters dropped more precipitously after that that should have been a minor trivial incident than anything else during my presidency.
That's extraordinary.
Well, and it gives a sense of the degree to which these things are still, they're deep in us.
Fumigate.
And,
Fumigate.
Sometimes unconscious. But I also think that there are certain right-wing media venues, for example, that monetize and capitalize on stoking the fear and resentment of a white population that is witnessing a changing America and seeing demographic changes, and do everything they can to give people a sense that their way of life is threatened and that people are trying to take advantage of them. And we're seeing it right now, right? Where you would think, with all the public policy debates that are taking place right now, that the Republican Party would be engaged in a significant debate about how are we going to deal with the economy, and what are we going to do about climate change, and what are we going to do about, lo and behold, the single most important issue to them currently right now is critical race theory. Who knew that was the threat to our republic? But those debates are powerful because they get at what story do we tell about ourselves.
Are you prepared to take the oath, Senator?
I am.
The president, who campaigned on hope and change, sees the continued potential for that change in the next generation, which includes his own daughters. They came to the White House as children, but Sasha Obama is 19 years old now and a student at the University of Michigan. Malia is 22 and is at Harvard. And while his daughters still keep a low public profile, Mr. Obama says they took part in the Black Lives Matter protests after George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis.
I'm wondering if, just as a parent, you were worried about them doing so, and as somebody who's had daughters who were taking part in that, what do you make of those who are now saying the Black Lives Matter protesters are equating them with the people who attacked the Capitol?
Well, my daughters are so much wiser, more sophisticated, and gifted than I was at their age that I always worry about their physical safety. That's just the nature of fatherhood. You will discover it when Wyatt stops just being immobilized in your house and can start wandering around and
I'm not going to allow that.
Driving cars,
That's not
flying
gonna
on
allow.
planes. You're terrified all the time. But in terms of them having a good sense of what's right and wrong and their part and role to play in making the country better, I don't worry about that. And they have both a clear sense of, and that I see in this generation, that what you and I might have tolerated as, yeah, that's sort of how things are, their attitude is why. Let's change it. And that's among not just my daughters, but it's among their white friends, right? There's this sense of, Well, of course, it's not acceptable for a criminal justice system to be tainted by racism. Of course, you can't discriminate against somebody because of their sexual orientation, right? There are things they take for granted that I want them to take for granted. But what I find interesting is they're also starting to be very strategic, about how to engage the system and change it. They're not just interested in making noise; they're interested in what works. And at least in conversations with my daughter, I think that a lot of the dangers of cancel culture and we're just going to be condemning people all the time. At least among my daughters, that they'll acknowledge that sometimes among their peer group or in college campuses, you'll see folks going overboard. But they have a pretty good sense of look, we don't expect everybody to be perfect. We don't expect everybody to be politically correct all the time, but we are going to call out institutions or individuals if they are being cruel, if they're discriminating against people. We do want to raise awareness. A great source of my optimism, when people talk about how do I think about my legacy, part of it is the kids who were raised during the 8 years that I was president. There are a bunch of basic assumptions they make about what the country can and should be that I think are still sticking. They still believe it, and they're willing to work for it.
And while the Black Lives Matter movement has brought national attention to the issue of police reform, these young men in the BAM program say they feel a dual threat every time they go outside. There's fear and distrust of the police and fear of gun violence on the streets.
Here in Chicago this year, let's face it, has been an increase in violence. When we met last time, obviously on the south side, west sides of Chicago, some of the surrounding suburbs, there had been gun violence for a while, gang activity for a while. We've seen an uptick in it, and then we've also had to process the fact that the relationship between police and community is not what we want it to be, and so often young black men, experience police not as a positive force to protect, but as somebody who is going to see you as a suspect or somebody to be feared. How's that played out for you guys, both while you're still in school, but also now that you're working?
Police in Chicago. For a while, I was driving Lyft. While I was still in college, I'd come home weekends, drive Lyft.
Mm-hmm.
And I was getting pulled over like crazy. Almost every night, I was getting pulled over. But the first question they asked, and I asked, "How you doing, officer? How's it going?" Their first question, "Any drugs or weapons in the car?" Granted, I'm a big black guy, with locks, and first thing they see, I'm just suspicious. But as I was telling the guys, I gotta make it home to my family. I can't be another case where some officer have his knee on my neck, choking me out. So my biggest thing is making it back home regardless. Anything that's going on outside, I love my family, love my baby more. And that's a feeling that you're gonna feel, Mr. Cooper. Like, get home, even when your eyes feel like they're about to pop out. You get home to your baby, and that joy and that feeling that you get from that baby, it's amazing. It gives you a little spark of energy.
I just love that baby smell. I just want to bury my face in this
For
neck.
sure.
Before a diaper change, right?
Yeah, that's mostly important to me, making it home regardless. Regardless of the police, they don't know me from a can of paint.
Yeah. How about you guys?
Two of the participants in this BAM circle are still in their teens. Armand Mormon is 14. He wants to become a visual artist when he grows up. Kingsley McCarthy is 15 and dreams of being an actor or a dancer. They both say they feel like they risk their lives every time they leave their homes.
When you think about being in school, is this something you have to worry about? Just, I'm not necessarily police, but just shootings, violence, generally, is that something that you think about, or is it something that is not your primary distraction?
Well, me personally, I love like going outside. I love like interactions with people, but it's like in the neighborhood I live in, it's very hard to do that. Every night, it's like before I go to bed, is it a gunshot that I'm hearing? Is it fireworks? And also, like, I love to wear I like wearing hoodies. So it's like when I walk down the street, like, is somebody gonna come and target me because I'm wearing a hoodie? Do they think I'm up to no good? So that's how I see it.
Yes, I would like to add on to our mom. I walk past a police car, they might, mistake me for doing something wrong or going somewhere that I have no business going.
Right.
James, you worried about this a lot when you were in high school. What about now?
So yeah, in high school, I actually used to have to map out my bus route, and I actually used to have to wear a bulletproof vest. So I would wear the vest to school. Once I get here, I'll hand the vest over to Principal Ross, and after school, put the vest back on, navigate through all the gang-infested areas back home to where I felt safe.
Mm-hmm. What have you been saying? Are you still out on 70?
So I'm no longer in Inglewood. Right now I'm in Marquette Park. I know that's not a big difference, but now I don't go to certain gas stations. I don't go to certain restaurants, and I also bought another vest. So it's still the same thing. It's not over with just because I'm out of school.
Right. And obviously, as a father, it makes you that much more
Yes.
stress.
Yes, but as far as shootings, like, the vest may protect me from that, but encounters with police, what's going to protect me from that? What's going to stop me from going to jail, even if I didn't do anything?
Mm-hmm. Right. So you feel like you're getting it from both sides.
Yeah, you're fighting two gangs. You have the street gangs, and you have the Chicago police.
Growing up, I mean, being like my age now, just become so desensitized to it. It's just like routine, like over policing, gangs, just try to stay out the way mostly. I don't drive because I get anxiety, bro. Like, because it's just like I don't want to be another hashtag, essentially. Like, I want to live my life out until like I'm like at least 80 or something,
Not unreasonable.
While Christian says he wants to live until he's 80 years old, James never thought he'd make it to be 26 because of all the violence in the neighborhood where he grew up. All three young men have had their struggles over the years, and they're now building lives for themselves and their families.
You have a sense of what's going on in the neighborhoods. How do you think we can be most helpful to you guys?
Electricity rates are high and power outages are happening more frequently. Now there's a solution that will help you. Savings you'll enjoy.
It's really sad. And it's not just sad the fact that I was born in northern Chicago, or north of Chicago, up around the Fox Lake, Antioch Lake and Fox Lake and Round Lake and places up there, but even in 2010, when I wound up in MCC in downtown Chicago being studied by Dr. Dana. Dr. Dana, being a psychiatrist, a professional psychiatrist, at that time, this was 12 years ago, identified the cruelty of what was going on the streets pertaining to street violence, and basically had lost all credibility at that point in time with law enforcement on the streets. He said it was a crying shame of what was going on in Chicago. And I understood a lot of those guys that lived up into that area being familiarized with some of the things that they was going through and what had happened, and why a lot of them just felt like that they had been not fallen through the cracks, but driven through the cracks. Literally driven out of the eyes of the general society to the point that they had to become street smart and they had to commit certain violence just to be able to stay alive. Some of them actually committed violence during the winter months just to get off the streets so that they would have a place to get out of the cold and have showers and being able to eat. Really, really sad. And the sadder thing about it is, coming near a neighborhood near you, just like the Walmart slogan, these same scenarios are not just happening in Chicago, but they're happening in and through the country all over. Some a little worse than others in other places than others, like Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'd pretty well peg it towards being the second worst. Probably New York would be the third. LA would be the fourth. And possibly either New Orleans or Miami, Florida would be the fifth. It's really sad. Even Atlanta is now becoming infested with this type of activity.
Over
Birmingham, Montgomery, Huntsville.
Across the street from the Hyde Park Academy on the south side of Chicago, where we met with the former president, is Jackson Park. This is the future site for the Obama Presidential Center, which will break ground later this year. There's hope that the sprawling campus will revitalize this neighborhood where Michelle Obama was raised and where Barack Obama started his career.
Right across the street, we're going to be building the Presidential Center. A lot of our focus is going to be programming for the young people in the community, boys and girls, young men and young women. And given that you guys have all gone through this program, BAM, you're in the middle of going through it, you've seen some things, you have a sense of what's going on in the neighborhoods. How do you think we can be most helpful to you guys? What are the things that you think would be most helpful in young people being able to navigate their own lives, be successful in school, have a positive future, be confident that they can get to 80? Give me some sense of what are some gaps that we could fill, or some things that are working that we need to build back up.
For me, I feel like having someone to communicate with or to run to without having to worry about getting injured or shot.
So just having a safe space where you can have conversations, interact with peers, talk things out, maybe learn from people who are a little bit older than you, have different experiences, get exposed to different things.
Yes.
I believe it should be like more opportunities, like more internships, more variety of things to do in our communities, because not everybody want to hoop or play ball, play football.
To trail on to that, I do agree. I feel like there should be more sponsorships and more things within the school, such as like an after-school program to keep the kids from off the streets, or like things that they want to do. Like, not everybody wants to fight all the time. Like, people want to express themselves within art.
Like Christian said, he got motivated when he saw you. Other neighborhoods, they see people like that all the time, successful people, all the time. We need people to come into the community. He like art. We need successful people that does visual arts in front of him, So what I'm saying, like things like that. Like, it's people that's my age that never tied a tie in their life. But you go into more gifted communities, They learn how to tie. They know what the difference of forks for food and salad fork. And, you know, the soup spoon.
Although I didn't learn that till I got to the White House. They had all these forks, yeah.
Right. That's when I learned it.
Which forks?
On visit with you.
Remember that?
And we ate
And
sandwiches.
I gave you the tip. You do this, and that's the bread. And that's the drink. The B and the D. That's how I remembered. So I wasn't eating somebody else's bread and drinking somebody else's drink.
So just being able to see things positive in front of them, not just a basketball court where they can come in, not just a boxing ring where they come in, let some anger off and do some push-ups. It's not everything that, you know, he's not even into that. So we got to put in front of them people that are successful in their field.
That's a great idea. Great thing.
Hearing each other's stories, seeing each other as we are, may not be a simple thing, but for President Obama, it is a crucial step to bring this country back from the brink.
Proud of you guys. Great to see you, man. Proud of you. All right. I like what you were saying about your daughter. I think that's right. All right. Good luck, man. Good to see you guys. If we are meeting face to face and hearing each other's stories, we can bridge our divides. And the question now becomes, how do we create those venues, those meeting places for people to do that? Because right now we don't have them, and we're seeing the consequences of that.
You know, I agree with what he says, but looking at the resistance that I've just received towards going to Dyersburg, going to a 12-step program, and because I was on a one-on-one conversation and I had said something that the team leader thought was either inappropriate or odd or weird, all of a sudden I get security called on me telling me that I'm no longer allowed to come back down there. Which, once more, how are you going to bridge the gaps if you can't even communicate and talk to one another? The bridges and the gaps will never be healed up as long as you have such resistance and animosity against a certain person or a certain topic that they're talking about, that you're not even willing to compromise a little with that person towards letting that person get whatever that he or she has to get out. But once more, that was another hurdle that I've been used to since I've come back to Northwest Tennessee, towards people making up lies about me and saying that they feel uncomfortable around me and all this other stuff. I tell you, Hickville down here in the South, they need to grow up and they need to get a real life. These people that's been spoiled rotten don't know what real problems are until you get to talking to the people in the city life, and they'll tell you what type of divide that has occurred with their generation, to the point that they're not allowed to speak, they're not allowed to discuss, they're not allowed to talk about certain topics neither. It's the work of the devil. Satan's out to kill, steal, and destroy. Satan's the author of confusion. As long as he can keep team leaders like down there in Dyersburg pertaining to a 12-step program towards not allowing for somebody like me to be able to share my testimony, even though it may sound weird, about the Antichrist and Secret Service, Homeland Security, Oklahoma bombing, me being falsely accused of other things like trying to blow up a Kentucky dam, in which was nothing more than a nutty idea that come from somebody. It wasn't me, that's for sure. But until people can feel relaxed in being able to have a conversation with an individual such as myself and realize this individual is only telling his story, he's only getting that in which what has occurred to him out, until people are willing to open up with people like me and with people like the people that Obama is talking to right there, the bridges will never be mended. And that's exactly what Satan wants to do. He wants to keep us pulling apart, divided, lying upon each other, etc., etc. It's really sad, the state that the Americans are in right now in comparison to where we was 35, 40, 50 years ago. Thanks again for listening. Good luck to all of us. Coming from the Windmill Ministries here at 291 Thompson Road, Chiron, Tennessee, zip code 38255, and God bless and shalom.